It's Friday, May 3rd, 1991, and I am here alone this morning. Let's see if I can still remember how to do the program without guests. I thank all the people that have joined me this week. It's been a fun week, but I've been feeling the need to talk about a lot of the local issues of importance to us in northeastern Connecticut, and I hope you will join me this morning talking about two subjects that I can think of, and I will set the table for that discussion. The number here is 928-2721, 928-2721. If you're calling from the Plainfield area, it's 774-5161. Write those phone numbers down near your telephone where you're listening to the WINY talk show. The Motor Vehicle Department, first of all, I don't think we've had an open forum even since it became known last week that some local property owners, entrepreneurs in northeastern Connecticut had called the state's bluff on the issue of providing rent-free office space to host the Motor Vehicle Department offices, which are leaving their site in the shopping center on Kennedy Drive in Putnam. The one most prominently mentioned is at Jolly Commons, which is on Route 12 in Danielson, just south of town. I understand, I haven't been down there myself, but I understand that's a decent site. I kind of laughed when I heard representatives from the Motor Vehicle Department saying that they had to look at the site to see if it met the needs of the patrons of the Motor Vehicle Department, if it was convenient and if the parking was good and everything. And of course, this is ridiculous in light of the fact that our alternative probably is to drive to Willimantic or Norwich to get Motor Vehicle Department services. I have come to the conclusion, and this was my first inclination on this story, and I abandoned it after a while because I wasn't hearing it from anyone else. I wasn't hearing it from any of our state representatives or from the mayor or in the press. My first inclination was that once again the threatened closing of Motor Vehicle Department's offices around Connecticut was a ploy to adopt higher taxes, and most specifically this time around a state income tax. And I am back to thinking that is the unspoken, if not conscious, subconscious, subliminal plan of the state government. This argument, I think, is buttressed by the fact that, and again, I have not been reading or hearing of this in the local media, but do you know that the lease on the Motor Vehicle Department offices in Putnam and overhead in running that office is the whole issue. The rent and the phones and the lights and the electricity are represented as being the issue of why they're closing the offices, that the people will not lose their jobs, that they'll be relocated to other places, that it's the overhead of running the office, the rent, the high rent, and the other utilities are the issue of why they're closing and where the savings can be made. Here, a copy of a letter, not much more than a memo, that was faxed to Mayor St. Ange, dated April 19th this year, to Mr. Bernard Healy, Jr. of Jupiter, Florida. He's down there with Burt Reynolds and Lonnie Anderson in Jupiter. Ray, closing of the Department of Motor Vehicles branch facility at the Putnam Shopping Center, Kennedy Drive, Putnam, Connecticut. Dear Mr. Healy, notwithstanding the fact that the extended term does not expire until December 31st, 1991, this letter is to notify you of the state's decision to vacate the subject premises on or about June 4th, 1991. From Anthony Cialone, Administrator, Leasing and Property Transfer. That's the Department of Public Works of the state of Connecticut. I think that extended term, unless I'm mistaken, is another way of saying the lease on the Motor Vehicle Department. And our own news department confirmed this information with Patrick Nolan, who is a spokesman for the Department of Public Works, that the lease at the Motor Vehicle Department on Kennedy Drive runs through the rest of this year. So then what is the hurry to close the office? Am I missing something? And I would say that inasmuch as the offer of this free space has been extended by Mr. Jolly, who owns Jolly Commons in Danielson, if they're serious about keeping the motor vehicle department open, and if they're serious that it's an issue of overhead, then I hope that Monday morning we will begin to move the stuff down to the Danielson site and keep the motor vehicle department open. I'm afraid that's not what it's about, though. Another interesting story is the whole issue surrounding the casino gambling at the Mashantucket Pequot Indian Reservation in Ledyard. I say hip, hip, hooray, 3 cheers for Governor Lowell Weicker, who has finally decided to go public with his clear opposition to the opening of the casino at the Indian Reservation in Ledyard. I happen to believe that this is out of a sincere conviction on the part of Governor Weicker that casino gambling and the extension of gambling venues of different kinds in the state of Connecticut is in the long-term bad interest of the people of the state of Connecticut. On our program only a couple of weeks ago, Richard Blumenthal, the Attorney General of the state of Connecticut, I was very pleased to hear how candid he was in saying that it was his experience that organized crime eventually became involved with gambling activity of this nature, and that was one of his strong concerns about extending gambling in the state of Connecticut. I'm sorry that if the Indians were mistreated 200 years ago in the United States. I don't know the history of the treaties that brought us to this situation where they are allowed to run casinos and open them to the general public and to the citizenry of the state of Connecticut and in the United States of America. Even though state laws in Connecticut forbid the operation of casinos, but I'm afraid that's just too bad. I think we don't want casino gambling in eastern Connecticut. Can you imagine the next time a recession rolls around in the state of Connecticut and the state is short of cash, and they can look to Ledyard and they can see people from Malaysia and Nevada and Rhode Island and God knows where else taking millions of dollars out of Connecticut from the casino at the Mashantucket Pequot Indian Reservation. Can you imagine our state legislature being able to resist the temptation to legalize casino gambling elsewhere in the state of Connecticut? I think that given the history of government and its appetite for money, that would not happen. Just look at what's going on right now with the Plainfield dog track and the efforts being made by State Representative Karen and Paul Sweet. I even noted this morning in the Norwich Bulletin that Rep. Lesko from Windham, Democrat State Representative from Windham, lists Jeff Davis from Pomfret as one member of the legislature that seems to be, these couple paragraphs. The leadership was left facing the problem of appeasing both the track conversion supporters and the Eastern Connecticut legislators to keep the votes it felt were needed to get the tax package to the floor. In the end, it appears to have satisfied both factions, but still lost its main objective. Rep. Lesko said several other Eastern Connecticut legislators, including Reps. Jefferson Davis, Democrat of Pomfret, and Peter Nystrom, Republican of Norwich, stood together to protect the Plainfield track's interests. It's an insidious business when we become so dependent on the revenues of gaming in order to keep a town like Plainfield healthy. How many stories have we heard just on this radio station in the last several months about Plainfield? The stories about the concession workers and their strike against the dog track. The stories of Paul Sweet down lobbying in the legislature to try and get video slot machines legalized and permitted at the Plainfield dog track. State Representative Michael Caron, a brand new Republican state representative from Danielson that represents Plainfield also, down in the legislature, exhausting the prestige of his seat in the legislature repeatedly for interests of the dog track. I think that this is what happens. We become enslaved to the money that dog tracks and casinos have and can bring into the state of Connecticut, and it's a slippery slope that we go down. Do we have that call on one also? Okay, thank you. Let's take some phone calls. I'm out of breath. Good morning. Hello. 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 Hello.
Hello.
Hi, you're on the air. Excuse me.
If this gaming casino is established and ready, won't the state get tax revenue from the daily handle of?
Attorney General Blumenthal said on that program that they would not pay taxes. Now I don't know whether they would pay
property taxes. I mean, they're going to get revenue like the dog track. Did they get the state of Connecticut's revenue on daily handle over there?
Yeah, that's like the takeout on the volume of
yeah, well,
of what's
that's the same thing over there. They're trying to confuse the people on that. They're going to get revenue from that casino, but they don't want to admit it, that's all.
Uh-huh. Well, if that's enough of a reason to have it, that's important.
This is just delaying tactics. They got federal permission, the Indians. So why delay this thing? It's going to happen anyway. They'll go to court.
Mm-hmm.
All they're going to do is make money, but make the lawyers richer, that's all.
Okay. Thank you. Well, I say here's a case where it's worth letting the lawyers get rich delaying them. I say frustrate them with whatever tactic is necessary. I'm not sure I understand all of the constitutional issues. Apparently, the part of the legal claim made in litigation by attorneys representing the Indians was that the fact that the state of Connecticut allows private organizations to hold Las Vegas nights, that was part of the hook used in the legal arguments of the Indians, which sustained their arguments in the federal courts. And so Governor Weicker is asking the legislature to consider making illegal the Las Vegas nights throughout the state of Connecticut for all organizations in order to help the state stand pat against the expansion into casino gambling. Okay, let's take another call. Good morning.
Morning, Isham.
Hi, you're on the air.
The state will receive absolutely no revenue whatsoever.
No revenue.
No, absolutely nothing. No property taxes, nothing. It's an Indian reservation.
No takeout on
No takeout. Absolutely nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing. That's why that's the big argument.
What is the takeout in Las Vegas or in New Jersey at the casino? Do you know what the percentage is that's turned over to the state?
I have no idea. No, it's different than pari-mutuel betting. I know that. I don't know how it's run.
Yeah, so they'll get nothing.
Huh?
They'll get nothing.
Nothing. No. What Connecticut should do, I think it's inevitable. I think this thing will go in. But what the state should do is immediately legalize gambling and try to discourage the Indians. If they were to legalize gambling, right away you'd have casinos popping up in that Norwich and the London area and all over the state, because I think that's really the only answer right now is to kind of fight fire with fire, because there's no other way. And this thing will do a tremendous business once it gets online. Everybody says now I won't support the Indians and I won't do that, but everybody knows that gamblers will go down there.
Of course it will.
Yeah.
Of course it will. Well, I come at it from you can tell that I come at it from a different point than you do. I don't so much resent the Indians making the money. I just think that it's kind of pathetic that we have to turn to this type of activity for that we have really such a low opinion of ourselves in Eastern Connecticut that we have to look to this kind of stuff as a way of building up Eastern Connecticut.
Well, but that's the mentality of the government. I mean, Weicker is putting a gun to everybody's head. We know well that by closing all these motor vehicle things and laying people off, we know the end result. Once the income tax goes in, we know everything's going to be fine again. The motor vehicles will open up, and we'll all be paying off the top now, not on your adjusted gross income. It's going to be off the top. If you make $100,000 a year between you and your wife, you're going to pay $10,000 to the state of Connecticut, and once that goes in, everything will smooth over.
I get the impression that everybody is not everybody, that state legislators are sort of becoming resigned to this, and that some people are starting to roll over. And I would like to see our representatives from this part of the state hold firm and not give in so quickly to the state income tax. You heard the story, perhaps on this radio station yesterday, that the union representing the school teachers in the town of Brooklyn had refused to accept only 6%. Aaron, run in here and straighten me out if I'm wrong on these figures. They had refused to accept only 6% increase next year in their salaries rather than whatever the percentage was that was agreed to in, I think 8% was what they had contracted for. The alternative is that school teachers in Brooklyn are going to be laid off. Now we've had about a year of wringing our hands and talking about the crisis that we're in. We're in practically a depression in New England in the economy, and the message has not sunk in, apparently, with public employees. They won't even take a 6%. People are losing their jobs. People are losing their homes. People are unable to pay their property taxes. And school teachers organized in unions are unwilling to accept 6% pay increases so that some of their membership may keep their jobs and so that the school can function and do the job for the children of the community. So we're being asked to cave in and have quote-unquote tax reform in this environment where the public sector seems unwilling to really change.
Why punish? I consider the school system just like a business. Why punish people who are doing their job and things are going good? Why punish them because other businesses are failing? There are many businesses that are doing good and people are still getting raises in the country, and there's plenty of people that are hiring. Engineering firms are hiring all over the country. Maybe not as much as last year, but people are getting raises. You can't, because some people are hurting. You can't make everybody hurt. That's not the answer to any problems.
But
misery loves company. Is that what you're saying?
No, that's not what I'm saying at all. The pay of those teachers in Brooklyn comes out of the pockets of taxpayers in the state of Connecticut and the taxpayers of the town of Brooklyn, and unless the whole it's not reasonable for one sector of the economy, the public sector, whose pay is derived from the citizens and from the private sector. Without the private enterprise, there is no public school. Well.
But who's to say certain people should take a cut in pay when times are bad?
What's a cut? What's a cut? They're getting they wouldn't even take a 6% increase. I think anybody that has a job in this environment would be very happy to just to hold steady at their pay.
Well, you've got the same thing up in Pomfret. We all know who Hull is, and we know what his mentality is. He thinks all old teachers should be fired because they got tenure and they make too much money. He made a blanket statement. It was in the Observer. Old teachers are lousy teachers, and we need all new young teachers. Now, that's the mentality of people that are running the town?
Well,
Why would the union buckle under to anybody like that? I mean, it's ludicrous. And I can't see punishing other people just because everything, not everything is terrible in the state of Connecticut. 50% of the businesses are probably down, but there's 50% that are still maintaining or at least making money, you know.
I think you're not visiting the same place as I am if you think only 50% are off. I think it's much worse than that. Maybe some other people will call in and give us some more anecdotal information. I've got to run. Thanks for joining me today. Isham Martin on the talk show. We'll be back. Back with more of your phone calls on the WINY Talk Show. Good morning. You're on the air.
Hello, Isham.
Hi, good morning.
A couple of points about the casino in Ledyard.
Yeah.
I agree with you entirely that the governor is on the right side of this issue, but I think you've got your rose-colored glasses on when you say that he's doing it strictly for reasons of keeping the mob out and moral reasons.
Mm-hmm.
The government of Connecticut draws a great deal of revenue from legalized gambling between the lottery and the highlight and the dog tracks and and all the other vices they have legalized in order to skim money from the poor and the ignorant. They don't want the mob to come in and muscle in on their territory.
Mm-hmm.
That's all that it is. This would siphon off gambling money that the state now enjoys.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
let me tell you why I have that insight, and why I'll tell you the truth, caller. I've gone through my life being naive and having rose-colored glasses about a lot of things, and you could be right, and I may be falling into that trap again. When I ran for the state senate many, many years ago, I put out a campaign piece, and among the things that I featured in the campaign piece were a long section on casino gambling, because at the time, Senator Skelly, who represented much of this listening area in the Senate, was on that Public Safety Committee, which has the purview over gambling issues. And there was an effort being made by people who owned something called the Greylock Corporation that was trying to expand then during another time of a poor economy in Connecticut, trying to extend casino gambling into the state of Connecticut. And so I took a strong position against extending casino gambling into the state at that time, and attracted the notice of Charlie F.J. Morse, the columnist in the Hartford Courant, who was at that time writing all of the political stuff for the Courant, and struck up a relationship with Charlie. And it became evident to me over the years that he was dead set opposed to the extension of casino gambling in the state of Connecticut, and that attracted him to me, and he wrote favorable editorials about my candidacy, which didn't put me over the top. Charlie Morse today is the principal speechwriter for Lowell Weicker, and one of Lowell Weicker's longtime friends and allies and buddies. And I know Charlie has this conviction against the expansion of gambling in the state of Connecticut, and I believe that he has Lowell Weicker's ear. So that's just one sense that I have about the thing that makes me think that it is a bona fide position and not just the fiscal one that you refer to. But what you refer to is there also, I'm sure.
Sure. I mean, it isn't a big step from people becoming addicted to gambling at a dog track to being addicted to slot machines at a casino.
Mm-hmm.
The only difference is you don't have to know about the dogs to play the slot machines.
Mm-hmm.
So it's more tempting to the average person. The other thing I wanted to mention about this was the whole rationale behind the Supreme Court allowing Indian tribes to put this in is if the state allows this form of gambling legally, they can't stop an Indian tribe from doing it.
Mm-hmm.
But this makes no sense to me because as I understand how a Las Vegas night works, number one, it's held on behalf of a charity. And you go in and you pay some money and you play the roulette wheel or whatever, and you win chits or points. And at the end of the night, you cash in your points for a blender or a TV set or something of this nature.
Mm-hmm.
And you take it home and you spent more money than you would spend to buy that blender or TV set. in a retail store, but you feel good about it because the proceeds are going to a charity,
Right.
and you can write off the value of the blender. This, to me, is a long shot from casino gambling where you come in and, high-stakes gambling, you pocket cash and walk away with it. I can't see people driving from New York and New Jersey to win an electric razor. You know what I mean? I can't see the rationale behind this decision.
Yeah. Well, I don't either, and only thing is, I haven't researched it carefully enough to even comment on that, except that it makes no sense to me that they should be able to open a casino because they're an Indian tribe and they have some treaty rights on the reservation because they're Indians. I can understand that, but to extend that to them being able to open it to the general public and the people living off of the reservation when such activity is illegal everywhere else in the state, that makes no sense.
Well, the Mashantuckets are a bad tribe to draw that reference to. These decisions were made in reference to the big tribes in the West who truly were exploited. I mean, who truly were almost wiped out over the years. And the Pequots are the beneficiaries of that. I think if you looked at the history of the Navajo or the Cheyenne and tribes of that nature, these decisions might make a little more sense in the broad term.
Mm-hmm.
But again, the comparison of Las Vegas night with casino gambling does not hold any water in my mind.
Okay.
Can't understand it.
Okay, good job.
Okay.
Thank you for calling.
Yep.
Good morning. You're on the air.
Good morning. Similarly, with the last caller, I believe that the government wants control over the gambling money. If it's not going to go to the state of Connecticut, if it's going to go to a private endeavor, then it's the kibosh is put on. Because if he were running true with his high morality, he would be saying, and as of today, we're not having any more lottery either, any more dog tracks, any more betting, because I'm against it, But he's not. He's really saying, if we're not getting the money, I think this is a horrible, terrible crime against humanity. For the Mashantuckets themselves, and I would say abolish all gambling.
Well, let's hold on there for a minute, though. To ask the state of Connecticut to backtrack on all of its positions on gaming in this economy and to give up the lottery as a way of showing the sincerity of your argument, I think is more than is reasonable to expect of our state government.
It's more than is reasonable to expect. You're right, but I'm saying that he should even interject that in his statement or somehow get it across that he is opposed. But the Connecticut public is just getting the fact that they just want our money, the tax money and the revenue money from the lottery. They don't want. Look at even what you brought up at the outset of the show about the motor vehicle department. They have to pay the rent to the end of the year. They still want to move out when they're claiming the rent is the problem. They're just speaking with, pardon this expression, it's forked tongue. He's not saying what he means. A lot of people, are against homosexuality. Yet he makes a law where everybody has to agree to have their kids taught or whatever, whatever. So you have to go all the way with this thread or not at all. If he says one thing, he has to apply it to his whole strength of morality and not say, you're doing this because I'm the governor. You may not like it, but you do it. This is the way it's going. And basically, that's all we've heard from him so far.
Caller, it sounds like you're driving in the Indianapolis 500 or something there.
Yeah.
What is that?
I was driving in my car when I heard this, and I had to stop at a payphone.
Okay.
But I really don't think if no one else can legislate morality, I don't think he can either. And I do have to give that tribe credit. There are bingo games going on there. I don't care for that either. A lot of people do. But they have made their whole, they had a thing on public TV about what they have done with their resources. They have brought themselves up out of despair, poverty, drunkenness, being a welfare state. They have quite a community going where each man puts his hand to the plow, and they all have a business sense. They have community homes. Very little of it is supported by the government, except for the land that I guess was originally theirs that they used to start off on. So he should research the whole thing, and just like everything.
Well, if we had to, if every community, and I use that in the broadest sense, if every community in the state ran some kind of vice activity in order to subsidize the general interest of that small community, whether it was more bars, more tracks, more gambling, more lotteries.
Every community does have a bingo game, and every Catholic church and every Baptist, whatever church they are held in.
Do you think dollar for dollar, pound for pound, the gambling activities run under the auspices of the state of Connecticut would equate with the high stakes bingo?
Either wrong is wrong if you're going to go that far again. I mean, you just can't say I'm a little bit pregnant or I'm a little bit against it.
Well, but you're trying to put a wholesome face on the activities.
That's what I think the governor is trying to do. I think he's just trying to get the backing of particular groups. If the man from Woodstock there, the ones that runs the Observer, and the other man that you cited from this morning's bulletin, if you look at their record, they have pretty wholesome facts all the way. They're not just coming out on this one issue for votes. So I don't think you should change the colors as the dollar decides it. And Weicker was pretty unpopular for a while, and I think he's looking to get popular again. And this is one way one segment of the population that he can do it with.
So it's your position that the governor should abolish all kinds of gambling in Connecticut to demonstrate his sincerity on this casino issue.
Right, or else let everything else go. Kentucky Derby, whatever.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you. Oh, that's the problem with some people that are philosophical by nature, is that they need everything to be black and white and to pursue complete consistency in every issue in order to be comfortable. And I'm afraid that in politics, that's not a realistic expectation. Certainly it's not realistic that the state of Connecticut should be asked to abandon all gaming in the middle of this recession in order for the governor and the attorney general to demonstrate their good faith in opposing casino gambling. Isham Martin on the WINY Talk Show. We got more good telephone calls on hold. We'll be to them after this.
Fish.
Telephone lines jammed up at the talk show. Right now, let's check Bob Harris's forecast, brought to you today by Safeway Petroleum. 55 degrees in Putnam by the Cargill Falls. Good morning.
Some interesting subjects this morning. I think that the business with the Indian tribe is kind of a little bit ridiculous. I agree with your opening statement. You nor I had nothing to do with their present plight or their past plight, for that matter, nor did our fathers. And I think that the business of not having to pay taxes on revenues from gambling is also ridiculous. They've got to come into the real world situation now. If they want to enjoy separate nation status, then let them be a separate nation. Let's slap up a toll gate right outside their tribal headquarters or wherever their lands end, and let's start checking visas on people who come and go, or level a tax.
Exactly. There aren't many situations in which this kind of game playing and maneuvering by government is appropriate, in my opinion. But this position that the Indians find themselves in legally, I think, is ridiculous.
I totally agree, and it's not only ridiculous; it's not realistic at all. They want to enjoy all the protection that we afford them nationally, and they want to enjoy the road systems and everything of the state. And now here they're saying, well, we're going to have a gambling operation, but we're going to keep all the profits, and you're not going to get anything from it. And I agree with the governor. If there were a way to stop it legally, I would do it. If they are the great people that one of your callers said, and they've done good things with revenues that they've collected, then let them be honest about it and say, well, the state deserves a share of this, and let's give it to them.
Yeah.
That's totally crazy. Going back to one of your other callers that you had when you're talking about unions and the people in Brooklyn, I guess it was, forgetting about that 6% increase, that also is crazy. You're absolutely right on that score. right now we have an inflation rate that's a lot less than 6%, I believe. Well, it's not.
How about his contention that only 50% of the businesses in northeastern Connecticut are off?
Well, you're right. I don't know where he's living, but he was totally wrong. And, you know, we've got to look at things realistically. You're right. There are a lot of people that are suffering. And here these people are saying, well, we've negotiated a 6% raise or an 8% raise, and we're going to get it despite the fact that you don't have any money. What would they do if the towns couldn't even pay the money? Go take us to court? I mean, this is crazy. Why do you have unions in the first place? You have unions because management is unfair or has mistreated the people.
Right.
In the case of towns, the management is you and I.
Right.
And we're not bad people. And we pay taxes, and we can only afford certain things. And now you go to an arbitrator who says, I don't care if you've only got $10,000. We need $12,000 worth of payroll money. You're going to have to come up with it some way, town. This is absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
And we've lost sight of things here. I'm not necessarily anti-union, but there's an awful lot of things that they do that are bad. And you know, the state employees and town employees in this state have had to give up some negotiated items,
right,
because we couldn't afford them.
Right.
And back, you remember about, 4 or 5 years ago when the state of Connecticut gave all the teachers a 9% raise 3 years in a row?
Yeah, the Enhancement Act money when we were flush from sales tax revenues.
And I stood up in Putnam, as a matter of fact, at the town meeting and said, what are you going to do when the state runs out of money? And everybody says, oh, they've always given the money. I said, we're going to have to pick up the tab. Well, we did, and we are. And now we're coming down to the point where a lot of us don't have jobs, and we can't afford those tax dollars, and yet they still want the 8% raises. And that's absolutely
I want to
crazy.
get a couple more calls in.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Good job. Good morning. You're on the air.
Yeah, good morning.
Hi.
I agree wholeheartedly with what that man said. Why is it that people go back some 200, 300 years, how the Indians were cheated out of their land, and expect this generation to make it right? But what I want to speak about here today is the Connecticut teachers' pay. I'm quoting from a piece of newspaper here dated September 26, 1990, where it says, Connecticut Teacher Pay Boost Number 1. The salaries of Connecticut teachers now ranks them second in the nation. Average pay for Connecticut teachers was $40,461 in 1989-1990, up $3,000 from $37,343. Now, they also pay $7,934 a year per pupil to educate these children, where for 180 days. I mean, wait a minute here. I mean, how about the other fellow that has to live all year on $10,000? I brought up that fact more than once, but the point of it is nobody wants to give ground. And the man that called up that said there's a lot of jobs in engineering, there are a lot of people that can't do engineering jobs either. And what do people do that can't do these kind of jobs? We have no industry around here. They keep bringing up the same thing. I wish I had a job in my youth for 180 days for the amount of money these people get. That's all I have to say today.
Thank you for joining me. Good morning. You're on the air.
Good morning, Aisha. I was listening to about this gambling thing. I'll be honest, like 4 days a year, we go down to Atlantic City. Of course, all I pay is the slots. But I'm afraid that if we have gambling...
Do you take your cat?
Pardon?
Do you take your cat?
No. My dog takes care of it for me. And anyhow, you know, I don't want to see gambling this close. Not that I will be tempted to go, because like at the track, we go once in a while on a rainy Sunday afternoon, like $2 a raise, and we generally come out just about even for our dinner and so on, you know?
Right.
But I was so tempted to, I don't know who you would have to ask, to put signs on our state highway as you're coming in towards the Indian reservation signs like, is your family fed tonight, or are your bills paid this week? But, you know, you throw these guilt trips in.
Yeah, sort of a Burma shave concept.
Yeah, something like that. But then, you know, some people, you can't. It wouldn't sink in. It would probably make them eat them worse.
You know what? I'm jammed up for time. Thank you for joining me.
Well, you have a good day.
We don't begrudge you your fun on your Atlantic City trips.
Thanks.
All
I love
right.
you too, June.
Okay, bye. Isham Martin on the talk show. We'll be right back. We're back, and let's get another call in. Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi, you're on the air.
I learned when I was a child in school that the Indians were given certain privileges, and these were never taken away from them. An Indian can fish or hunt any time of the year without a license, and there are other privileges that were granted to them. Now, this privilege was granted to them by... And, the white man came and slaughtered a lot of them, took their land and everything. And to me, I predicted that they would get that right to run that casino. Not that I'm interested in a casino. However, I don't think that competition should start by the government of the state and allow somebody else to do it. This is a basic privilege that they have, and I don't think that anybody should go in competition with them.
So you'd like to see the Indians have the exclusive right to have casino gambling in Connecticut?
In Connecticut, yes. I mean, I don't know about Atlantic City and Las Vegas and all that, but I mean, all that, there's a lot of that is run by perhaps dishonest people or something like that. I don't know, but
you don't think that organized crime could snooker the Mashantucket Pico Indians and eventually, by intimidation and business tactics, dupe these people?
This is a possibility. However, they should enjoy the privilege of being protected from anything like that also.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye. I think that the people of Connecticut deserve the protection of the state of Connecticut from the eventual outcome of what will happen in Ledyard. Isham Martin on the talk show. Thanks for joining me today. It's been fun. Have a great weekend. It's 10 o'clock.
If you're single and 65 or older, you're well over the filing requirement. I don't know why he told you don't have to file. What did that income consist of? Was it all Social Security or?
That was Social Security and a pension.
Yeah. See, well, we don't consider the Social Security, so put that aside.
I see.
We only look at all other income initially in determining whether one must file.
Well, then he was right. Then the pension doesn't come up to $6,100.
For 1990, that's right. Yeah, if your pension is below that and there's no withholding tax on that pension, then you don't have to file.
All right.
Get out of jail free. We're going to give you the get out of jail free card. You're out of trouble. All right.
Oh, thank the Lord.
Okay, thanks for listening.
Yeah.
Okay.
See, the income, I guess, defined for tax purposes is different than what people think of income as money coming in, money that you get. But for tax purposes, gross income is all income as well, except that which is exempt by law. And in this particular case, Social Security benefits initially are exempt unless you are over a certain amount. Then we start calculating whether you pay tax on that.
We've got some people that have returned from the war already.
Right.
You filled us in last time on any breaks for returning service people or anything. Has anything changed, or do you want to just restate that?
Well, I'll restate it and add a couple things. One, if they were stationed in the combat zone, they have at least 180 days to file the returns after they depart the combat zone. So if they're back now, start calculating 180 days from the time that they left. They get to file the 1040. There's a complete suspension of any collection or examination action that we may have going on them, so they don't owe any additional monies that they may already owe. If they file later, after April 15th, we will pay interest retroactively back to the due date of the return. So that's a change. That was something that was authorized by Congress. They changed that. For the money that they earned while in the combat zone, if you're an enlisted person, it's totally excludable from income. For a commissioned officer, they get a $500 a month exclusion. So those are some of the basics of what they're entitled to, and certainly the President and Congress had some good intentions along those lines.
You filled us in a little bit on the electronic filing. We mentioned that before, the number of 61,000 electronic filings already in Connecticut.
That's right.
This year. How does that work?
What that is you can take your return already prepared by yourself or someone else, or go to somebody and have it prepared. And what they do, they are a qualified preparer in the sense that they're approved to file electronically, and they take that return and they send it by computer directly to the IRS, and it's for refund returns only. But the features or advantages of that are: 1, it's extremely accurate; 2, it's safe. You don't have to worry about the return getting lost in the mail; and 3, you can get a refund as quickly as 2 weeks if you elect direct deposit to your bank account.
Where's the benefit for the government in that?
And professional development grant. When it was put in the contract, it was called professional development grant. We sort of disbanded that term and just called it IPDP. We use that process I described to you. I think one in here says it goes to the General Staff Development Committee, and then the other one says it goes to 3 members from the teachers and 3 members appointed by the superintendent. That's what we do. It doesn't go to the Professional Development Committee as a whole. It goes to 3 teachers appointed by usually a BEA president, or usually it's a volunteer basis, however the teachers union wants to do it. And then 3 people that are appointed by the superintendent. And that committee meets monthly and reviews the applications, goes through the criteria and the guidelines, looks for things like what's the effect on students, what's the effect on this person, what about dissemination, what about cost, what about how long it's going to take, is it realistic, all those things. Then, if it's approved, if the concept is approved by the committee, sometimes it will be approved immediately. Sometimes we'll ask the person to come in because we have some questions. We'll send the person a memo saying, we've met, we've reviewed it, we have questions. These questions, please come to our next meeting on such and such a date to respond to them. So the person would come, the person responds to them in a way that sounds good. The person then is assigned an advisor. The advisor may be somebody on the committee, it may be a person who's gone through this process before and was really excited about it. This advisor is someone who's there to maintain a contact to make sure the person really does follow through. Not as an evaluator, but someone to prompt them, continue to prompt them, keep on touch. So usually, it's just usually a fellow teacher. It's usually not an administrator who is assigned as an advisor. And then on the next page is actually a person who did a program. She was a middle school gifted, talented teacher. And this is the form that a person fills out. They usually handwrite it first. If we have questions, we'll add to it, handwritten. And then the coach and the person will go back and write a final draft, have it typed, and bring it back to the committee. And usually the committee will then officially approve it, so to speak. But this person was relatively new to gifted and talented at the time she wrote this. She wrote a 2-year plan. She wanted to expand the resource materials library. She wanted to improve staff development, not only for herself, but other teachers on the whole topic of gifted education. She wanted to learn about gifted underachievers. She wanted to research the emotional needs of gifted kids. And she wanted to actually identify a creative problem-solving program and some techniques. Then she has listed some activities there. Outcomes, what she thinks will be the outcomes, and then some activities. All things that she can do. So you can see there, it isn't just one conference that she's going to. She went to the Confertude, which is held up at UConn every summer. She took a course through our own program called Time to Think. She was going to go to a one-day program at Columbia University. She was going to go to an update conference at Southern Connecticut State University. So you can see that it isn't This is not to be used just to go to a conference. This is what I'm pressing upon. It's the conferences and all those activities are used to accomplish something that you want to accomplish as an individual. Okay, so you don't say to yourself, geez, I heard that the National Science Teachers Convention is held in Washington this year. I'd like to go. Okay? No, you have to identify what it is. What are your objectives? Why are you going? And we don't like to see you just go to one thing because you can't learn everything at just a conference. We want you to do other things, visit other schools if that is applicable, go through some other conference, take a course. Okay? The only thing that we won't pay for, I mentioned, which is in the contract, we will not pay for people who have their provisional certification. If you have your provisional certification and you've worked up an IPDP and one of the activities is to take a course over at UConn, it just happens to apply to your master's, we're not going to pay for that. It's only for those people. We will pay for your conferences, we'll pay for everything else, but we're not going to pay for your courses that lead up to certification requirements to go from provisional to a standard. That is the one caveat. And that has not been a problem. It's not been a problem. First of all, there aren't that many people in that situation. Number two, those that are in that position know that it isn't really quite fair for them to expect the school system to pay for their 30 hours beyond the bachelor's when the rest of us probably didn't have that benefit. Okay, and then on the back is evaluation. These are things that she knew that she was going to be able to show us as a result of the program. She was going to have an expanded resource library. She was going to run a professional development program for teachers. And she expected teachers to be compact in curriculum. To be honest with you, I don't really know what compact in curriculum is, but she knew what it was. It has something to do with kind of signing kids off if you know certain things. They can spend time doing something else. But that teachers weren't doing that before, but after her plan went into operation, she would expect the committee to be able to see that teachers are compacting for kids in her programs, that they were signing them off on certain units and social studies so that they could perhaps do something else independently that's more appropriate. And this particular program costs about $649. Again, as I said, if you really want to do this, you have to think in terms of about $100 per teacher. So if you have 40 teachers, about a $4,000 budget should do you. In other words, you're not, as I said, it's an involved process. It's not something, not all 40 people are going to do this. Okay? They don't want to go through all this. So, but as I said, about 10 to 15%. Out of your 40, I would expect maybe 6 or 8 people might like to do this. And if they average $500-600, so you're talking about $4,000. Okay?